This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter and far more dangerous. For decades, the system you live inside felt solid, predictable, self-renewing. Money flowed. Crises came and went. And somehow, the center always held. Or at least, it appeared to. What just happened did not announce itself with alarms. There were no emergency addresses, no countdown clocks, but a pillar shifted, not collapsed, shifted. And when systems like this move, they don't move all at once. They move slowly, invisibly, until one day the rules you assumed were permanent are simply gone. If you're watching closely, you can feel the pressure changing now. If you're not, you'll feel it later through prices, jobs, choices you didn't know were being made for you. Stay with me. This matters more than it looks. Because to understand what comes next, you have to see what is actually in control now. For a long time, you were told this system was guided by policy, by elections, by leaders making choices. That is no longer true. What controls the system now is not ideology or personality. It's dependency, a structure where spending requires constant borrowing. Borrowing requires constant trust, and trust is no longer automatic. The center of gravity has shifted from decision makers to balance sheets, from speeches to spreadsheets, from authority to exposure. The system keeps moving not because it's healthy, but because stopping is unthinkable. Debt rolls forward, payments are delayed, confidence is assumed. And here's the critical reframe. This is not about who is in charge. It's about who can leave. The most power inside a system like this belongs to the actors who can reduce their risk quietly, patiently, without triggering panic. Not all at once. Not loudly. That's what makes this moment unstable. The controls still look intact, but the incentives underneath them have changed. And once incentives change, behavior follows. Slowly at first, then all at once. For most people, the shift didn't feel like a shift at all. It felt gradual, administrative, normal. Before, confidence was assumed, the system absorbed excess. Imbalances were treated as temporary. Now, stability is managed. Risk is distributed. Exposure is calculated. This didn't happen overnight. It happened through repetition, through normalization. Large deficits became routine. Extraordinary measures became standard. Emergency tools became permanent fixtures. And slowly, the idea that this system could end stopped being unthinkable. That's the most dangerous moment for any structure. Not when it's attacked, but when its limits are quietly acknowledged. Because once participants accept that permanence is gone, they behave differently. They hedge. They diversify. They plan exits. Not dramatic ones, orderly ones. That's how systems unravel now. Not with collapse, but with drift. And the problem with drift is that you don't notice it until something small breaks the surface. And when it does, it doesn't look like the beginning. It looks like an exception. And then something small did break the surface. On paper, it looked technical, routine, almost boring. A routine adjustment, a portfolio decision, numbers moving between columns, but this was not noise. This was signal. One of the largest holders inside the system began reducing its exposure. Not dramatically, not recklessly, patiently, month after month, quarter after quarter, no press conference, no announcement, just a steady withdrawal of support from a structure that depends on uninterrupted belief. And here's why that matters. This system only works if surplus money has nowhere else to go. If the center is unavoidable, if alternatives don't exist. But this wasn't a protest. It was a calculation, a decision made after watching what happens when assets inside this system become leverage. When reserves stop being neutral, when safety turns conditional. If you're still thinking this is about one country making a move, pause. That's the distraction. Because what you're actually watching is a test, a quiet one. And the system's response to this test is what determines everything that follows. Because once that calculation is made, the mechanics matter more than the headlines. This system does not run on loyalty, it runs on flows. Surpluses have to park somewhere. Deficits have to be financed. Every imbalance creates pressure that must be absorbed by someone. For decades, the benefit flowed upward. Cheap borrowing, deferred consequences, global demand for promises. But here's the hidden mechanism. Risk doesn't disappear, it gets transferred. When surplus nations recycled their gains back into this system, they absorbed volatility so others didn't have to. They held paper claims, they accepted delayed payment, they trusted neutrality. The moment that trust weakens, the burden shifts. Exposure moves inward, financing gets heavier, support becomes conditional, and the damage doesn't show up where the decision is made, it shows up downstream, in prices, in wages. In the cost of staying afloat, the beneficiaries stay insulated longer, the shock absorbers thin out. That's how this machine works, quietly, efficiently. And once you see it, you understand why the next phase isn't theoretical, it's mechanical. Then the pace changes, signals start stacking. Not one at a time, together. Rates move, costs rise. Margins shrink, borrowing gets tighter, refinancing gets louder. Every rollover carries more weight than the last. This is where systems get fragile, not at collapse, at acceleration, because now every adjustment feeds the next one. Less outside demand means more internal support. More internal support means more currency creation. More currency means less purchasing power. You don't see it as policy. You see it at checkout, at renewal notices, at the quiet math you do before saying yes to anything. And the system responds the only way it knows how. By pushing forward, by assuming tomorrow will absorb today. But the margin for error is shrinking. Each move has consequences. Each delay compounds risk. This is no longer a warning phase. It's a momentum phase. And momentum doesn't ask permission before it carries you somewhere you didn't plan to go. This is where it stops being abstract. This is where it reaches you. Not as a headline, as a constraint. You feel it when your paycheck stretches less than it used to. When savings stop feeling like protection and start feeling like erosion. When stable expenses quietly renegotiate themselves upward. You didn't vote for this. You didn't design it, but you're absorbing it. Because when systems rebalance, they don't start at the top. They start where resistance is lowest. That's you adjusting expectations, you delaying plans, you carrying volatility that used to live somewhere else. And here's the uncomfortable truth. This phase depends on you not connecting the dots, on treating each pressure as isolated, temporary, personal. If this is making sense so far, stay with me. Share it. Because understanding the pattern is the only leverage left to people without institutional power. What's happening to you is not accidental. It's the human footprint of a systemic shift. And it doesn't stop at borders. Because once this pressure crosses borders, it stops being manageable. It starts to echo when one system tightens, others feel it. Trade slows. Settlements change. Confidence fragments. Countries that once aligned automatically begin hedging quietly, not choosing sides, choosing insulation. Payments reroute. Currencies diversify, reserves migrate. Individually, each move looks cautious. Collectively, they redraw the map. This is how global order changes now. Not with declarations, with logistics, shipping contracts, settlement agreements, currency clauses buried deep in trade deals. And the unsettling part is this. No one is coordinating this shift, which means no one is controlling it. The old center still exists, but gravity is no longer singular. Multiple systems can coexist for a while, until friction appears, until misalignment becomes costly. And when that happens, stability doesn't disappear. It fractures. The question is no longer whether the system adapts. It's whether adaptation happens fast enough to prevent collision. And that uncertainty is where the future starts to accelerate. From here, the future doesn't narrow. It splits. There are 3 paths forward, all of them costly, none of them clean. The first is adjustment, a slow acceptance that dominance fades. That influence becomes shared. That constraints replace privilege. This path requires restraint, structural reform, and a political willingness to admit limits. That willingness has been historically rare. The second path is erosion, the reform. No rupture, just continuation, more borrowing to cover old borrowing, more pressure pushed downward, living standards adjusting quietly instead of policy changing loudly. This path feels stable until it doesn't, because erosion only becomes visible when something essential gives way. The third path is rupture, a moment where confidence snaps, markets freeze, rates spike. Interventions fail to calm behavior that has already decided to move. This path doesn't announce itself early. It looks like the others right up until it isn't. What matters is this: the system hasn't chosen yet. It's drifting between them. And drift under pressure is not neutral, because the longer the decision is delayed, the fewer options remain. So here's the part that doesn't resolve. There is no closing bell for this shift. No single date you'll point to later and say, that's when it happened. Systems like this don't end. They thin out, they harden, they stop responding the way you expect them to. And the most dangerous moment is not collapse. It's adaptation without consent. When new rules arrive quietly, when costs move silently, when power rearranges itself before most people realize they were part of the equation, nothing in this story requires panic. But it does require attention, because once confidence is gone, it doesn't come back on command. And once alternatives exist, loyalty becomes optional. This isn't a warning about tomorrow. It's a description of, now, if you want to understand where this leads, you can't look for villains. You have to track incentives, flows, exits. Stay with this. Follow the pattern. Watch what moves without permission. Because the next phase won't ask if you're ready. It will just arrive. If you want to go deeper, this is where the real story begins.